Okay, so mine is actually less about facilitating student learning directly anyways. It's about facilitating student learning to make sure they get the materials that they need to facilitate student learning. So but this is about inclusive access, why, what, and how, and thank you again for my table for slowing me down last night to make sure we had the what. My name's Shelley Rodrigo. I'm the Associate Director of the Writing Program at the University of Arizona, specifically brought on when they started undergraduate degrees and to put the undergraduate writing courses online. I'm also an Associate Professor in the Rhetoric, Composition, and Teaching of English graduate program. So, summer of 2015, a new writing program director, a good friend of mine, and I both descend on University of Arizona, and we have a relatively new writing program admin team, and we inherited a lot of things. So then we inherited about 150, but because of course size change, we now currently have, so kind of the context here, 170-ish faculty, about 2/3 of which are graduate teaching assistants, and every year we have 35 to 40 new graduate teaching assistants. Each semester, over 300 sections of writing, and over 6,000 students each semester. So all that to say, big program, big program. So the challenges we were facing, one, again, and I'm going to specify, we inherited this. The program for decades had a custom textbook, and the royalties that were made off of that custom textbook were integral to the program finances, meaning we could not just say and drop the custom textbook. Yes, we also have some squeegee about the ethics of that, but this is what we inherited. We also inherited, or I specifically inherited, so these are the problems that I was facing. I needed to think about the curriculum for first year and 300 level professional and technical writing classes for online environment. And also, after the first year, my Arizona Online, so specifically the online campus, shifted to a 7.5 week term. So basically they got 2 terms in each semester. And I actually prefer that. And if you want, after all this, I'm happy to talk about that. I taught at a community college for 9 years, and there's really good reasons for this. But what it causes, Arizona Online is also very much targeting the traditional online student in the sense that someone who is not necessarily near campus. And last summer, I had an Army officer during my 7.5 week class who was in 5 countries. And so something like that person having to order and get a textbook shipped to them, this is not going to fly in these classes. So these are the kind of the challenges that I was facing. Opportunity knocked for me. So the University of Arizona has every year IT Summit. It's this one-day conference like EDUCAUSE, if any of you know of EDUCAUSE, which is primarily for IT professionals, but there's also usually a small teaching and learning arm. Of course, hired for these are the people I want to network with. I go to this, and that first time at lunch, I sat next to the administrative head over the student union and bookstore. And I was explaining kind of the situation we were having. And one of the other situations we were having with that custom book is not only that we had it, but we had to revise it yearly. Because if we're dependent on the sales, we can't have a used sale market. And so I was talking to her about the online and the revising yearly. And she goes, "Have you heard of inclusive access?" I'm like, what is this inclusive access stuff? And so she explains to me inclusive access is that the instructor, or in our case, the program, decides on the book that they're going to use. At Arizona, they specifically only do inclusive access digitally. You can do it paper, but that means the students have to swing by the bookstore and still pick something up. But the idea is that they set it up and have access day one to the book instead of waiting for your students to get paid to go get your book. Access day one. Now, legally, technically, they have to have an opt-out period. Usually it's the same period as that drop. And so there's some system, some survey type system that they get reminded both ideally by their instructor, but also emails by the bookstore saying, if you do not want this added to your student bursar's account, you must opt out. But then digitally, everything is magically there. Now, when I first heard this, not only was I thinking about the 7.5, but I'm like, oh my gosh, if we took the guide, that's the custom book, digital, means we could revise it every 2 or 3 years. Delightful. But as the online director, I was also, yes, my faculty and my students would have access day one, and I wouldn't have a student 3 weeks in the course saying, I'm still waiting for Amazon to send it to me. We hit the ground running with a beta test with the professional and technical writing courses, and this actually was a great opportunity for us. So most professional and technical writing rhetorics, these are the big writing books, can cover both business writing and technical writing. The content is there. They're large books. If you're asking students to buy this huge book, usually over $100 new, for one term, you're asking a lot of investment from them. What was nice with the way we bundled it, for less than the cost of one new copy of that, the students got 4 books. They got that. They got a handbook in technical writing. They got this delightful case studies book, so technical writing case studies. And then one of my favorite Bedford books, this tiny little thing on team writing. They got that all bundled. They got a 2-year access to it. And we had an undergraduate certificate in professional and technical writing that those books fulfill the need for all 3 classes. And so yes, part of this was also going to the students and going like, look, you've taken this class, you've already paid for these books, just take these 2 other classes with us and you will have a certificate that tells your hopefully soon to be employer that you have spent time focusing on writing. But again, the key was access day one, actually more bang for their buck, because at this point the relationship between you and the bookstore and the publisher is that there's no used market with digital, and then there's a higher percentage of student purchasing with inclusive access, so you can negotiate lower price points. So that was our first test. In that, we have 15 to 20 sections a semester, so it was a nice test to see how this was going with both the instructors and the students. But the larger program, all the rest of those 300 classes and 6,000 students. So going digital with the guide and then a handbook. So we were always had our custom guide. We went with Writer's Help 2.0, which is a Launchpad digital version of one of the handbooks. So that brought down the core cost of the custom book and the handbook. Custom no longer needs to be updated yearly. So, I mean, we're seeing institutions potentially wanting departments and programs to be slightly entrepreneurial. This is potentially a way for that to happen. Again, there is potentially ethical squeeginess. That's another conversation. But doing it in a way that is sustainable, not having, I mean, the budget we inherited, a third to a half of the budget was going into rewriting the book each year, and that's kind of ridiculous. And then what's exciting is the additional digital applications. So both with the professional and technical writing and with this, we all of a sudden got videos and quizzing material, and actually what was really exciting about the first digital version of the guide, just the minimal ability to take all of the activities in the book, turn them into Microsoft Word documents that the student can download, type, and then submit. Again, piloting. We did a small pilot of these 2 last summer with the summer school population, so smaller numbers, and then full program rollout last fall. So tips and lessons learned, AKA my reflection. So I first stopped by, every time I say this, I knock on wood, faux wood, I don't care. Last year went beautifully. I had problems, and I had to look my faculty, especially my administrative team, in the eye and go like, with the program this big, we will have techno glitches. It's just a question of how many of them. Is this something we can manage? It's completely manageable, so yay. And so what instead, so I'm sharing with you, yay, it was manageable. I'm gonna share with you why I think that happened. So first and foremost, understanding the team that you want to work with inclusive access. So you want to, it's always set up through the learning management system, so Blackboard, D2L, Canvas. So you want to make sure your friends and part of your team who specifically knows what's going on and working with you in the LMS support group on campus. Similarly, the bookstore, it is, technology's also set up through systems with the bookstore, making sure that you've got a team here. You have specific names and numbers and emails that you can reach out. And after this first year, we kind of had an aha moment. It's like, oh, well, why don't we meet? So we met last April and just debrief. And then we already had some whispers on what things might be changing through the publishers. And we're like, yes, we will debrief each year. So at least setting up a moment where you're seeing how this is all going. That was definitely useful. Again, pilot testing. I lucked out that between having a smaller group of instructors associated with a class was manageable pilot test, and then I had the timing of getting it rolling out in summer, again, smaller group. Easily could pilot test just with a handful of faculty over a regular term, but this I cannot stress enough. When you pick your pilot test, folks, make sure you have the whole spectrum of faculty techno-savvy. The fact that we're here implies that we probably all have the ability to do basic troubleshooting in a way that some of my faculty do not. And it was really important for the pilots that I have some of those, as I like to call them, my extreme hand holders, and both faculty and students. That's a case where need to spend some time with them to get set up. So making sure the pilot test has a little bit of everyone. I think what made this most successful was multiple support mechanisms. The first one, and the one I'm really excited about, is we had open labs. So at the beginning of each term, a few times before the classes started, so 1 or 2 hour segments 2 or 3 times before classes started, just being in a room, ideally a room that had a few computers, but people usually prefer to bring their own laptops and do the work on the laptop, but being there for people to help them set everything up. And so the setup is usually your instructors, well, it depends. This becomes a question of what's the relationship, how big's the program. But in our case, because we had 2 books that came from 2 different technologies, my instructors had to set up both. Remember, 170 instructors, a bunch of them new. So having the open lab periods so they could come and sit down next to someone who knew what they were doing. And this was just a team of myself and volunteers who were some of my more techno-savvy folks. So when I was setting up that open lab, I was emailing the equivalents of you all in my program and saying, hey, would you share some of this with me? I'll owe you lunch, that type of setup. And that worked out well, but what worked out beautifully and kind of turned into something else is, so the first week of classes, we found a smaller meeting room in the department, and we took it over for the week. And we had treats in the room. Actually, Macmillan, my local rep, paid for the treats, and water bottles and stuff like that. And again, we made sure from about 8 a.m. till 4 p.m., there was always at least one person in the room that could help folks set up their technology. What we learned last fall is it became this nice, informal, beginning of the semester gathering point. Yes, my grad students would come by and snake food twice a day to eat, but my lecturers were coming by and just asking, well, I'm thinking about doing this in my class. What do you think? I mean, that has nothing to do with setting this up. And so when we did it for spring, we switched it to same thing, first week of class, always having this, but in the room, we always had someone who could help with the technology, and then always had one of the writing program administrators there. And it just becomes this nice welcome back. And food covers a lot of things. So the open labs were fabulous that way, and building community. What's not surprising to you is the digital handouts and screencast videos. Of course we had those. So digital handouts either being PDFs with screenshot, step-by-step instructions and screenshots. I honestly prefer making them Google Documents, because if I catch an error or someone points something out, I can quickly go fix it, and then everyone's hitting the same URL and the error is fixed. But having digital handouts and then the screencast video, walking through, explaining what's going on, and sending those out usually a month before the term starts, a week before the term starts, and the week then also includes the list of open lab dates, so they know where, if they get stuck, who they can find for help, when and who. This, though, was actually the tip by my bookstore and was critical in terms of student adoption, that having sample lessons ready to share, and specifically sample lessons for the first week of class. So again, we know students do not want to read their texts. We also know from experience that a lot of students can't afford to get books right at the beginning of the term. And that's part of that is the textbook glitch, right? It's like I have to wait until my next paycheck three weeks out before I can buy the textbooks. And books are expensive, so I get that. They're making difficult choices. So if the instructor is not showing that they're going to use this book, this digital resource, the first week of class, of course the student is going to opt out. So my team of kind of faculty support, we developed first week activity ideas that instructors can do to get the students in and actually using the tools. My favorite activity that one of my graduate students developed was just a basic scavenger hunt. Again, we had two technologies, and so it made sure that they were logged into both. It got them looking at different parts of the text, the table of contents, getting a sense of what was there. And it was a nice scaffolding of getting them in, getting them used to the technology, getting them wandering around a little bit. And then last but not least, making sure that whomever on my team was going to get the freaked out, my student can't access this, that I had a nice tight little list of company contact information. So for my particular setup, the custom book is published through Vital Source. So I had my regional Vital Source support person's name, phone number, email. And then the handbook, Launchpad product. So I had my regional rep and the Launchpad 1-800 number for students. Usually it was a student problem at that point. And just kept those nice and clean, easy to copy and paste into an email for when people needed it. So I was not digging that up. And also it helped if I had kind of connected with those people in advance, even giving them a warning of, hey, we're about to do this. It's a lot of students hitting the system. I know we'll have problems. Recognize my name, please. My biggest takeaway, anyone who is doing inclusive access, please, if you have one takeaway today, it is the front door metaphor. When you visit a house for the first time, you always go through the front door. Now, for a lot of houses, the easier door that people go who visit or live there is through the garage, or it might be a back door if it's a friend who's coming through, or rascally teenagers rappel down to the roof through the window, whatever. But the first time you go to the house, you go through the front door. The inclusive access widgets in the LMSs, those are the front door. Now, most digital textbooks allow what we call deep linking. So if you want them to read chapter 12, unit 4, there's usually a way with the technology, either Launchpad or in Vital Source, to deep link directly to that section within your LMS. So the student will LMS, and you'll have the listing of go read this material and then do these problems, this question, whatever, and you can deep link directly to the page. So the student doesn't have to try to flounder around through the digital table of contents. Yes, usually we want to set our courses up that way. We want to cut down on student confusion and get them directly to the material. However, when setting up inclusive access, the first time they go to the digital textbook materials, they have to go through the front door. And what people are not thinking about is that first initial contact with the inclusive access. There's a lot going on digitally. Basically, an account is usually being started, especially with mine, first year composition. An account is being started. It's connecting through the bookstore and the publisher. They're making sure, okay, this person is with this class. This person is new, and now they need to get a year or 2 years or whatever the licensing is. All of this stuff is happening in the background technologically within minutes. And if you do the deep link first, it glitches. But if you do the front door, that's all more likely to be successful the first setup. Now, I will also say that first week of class, there's hundreds of thousands of students doing this all at once. So what I found, the two biggest things that I was able to suggest to my instructors the second round was, one, make sure they're going through the front door. So doing that activity. So I now have a lot of instructors who in class tell everyone to bring their devices. They go, okay, today we're going to do a scavenger hunt, and so they're helping that they take them, walk them through the front door collectively, and then let them do the scavenger hunt in class, and it takes care of most of the problems. But then what will happen is like, well, 3 of my students couldn't log in, and I'm like, so just remember, again, there's hundreds of thousands of students logging on right now. Tell that student to try over the next 24 hours. If they're still having problems, come back to me. That takes care of most of the issues. So front door, it's busy the first week. Everything went really well last year. So I'm gonna wrap it at that. Any questions?